Welcome. I'm so glad that you can join me here today. 236 on the continuation of What is Ascension from excerpts pages 603, 604, 6 and 605. 3 pages. And this is out of the TheSovereignLight, named after my ministry. This novel, A Course in Metaphysical Spirituality. And how do you do? My name is Reverend Maria Arvanitidis. Won't you join me here today? With your presence, such an honor to have you here. So grateful that you're resonating up to now to have your interest in the next lesson and the next lesson. And shall we begin? Take a few deep breaths in, whew, and out. And you can use various mantras, various movements, if you will, whatever helps to connect to this here environment that I may share with you through the screen into your morphogenic holographic field, that you might feel this frequency and bring your consciousness into your heart space center, and from there just breathe in this relief, this sigh of relief, breathing through your heart and from the soles of your feet. Woohoo! Right here. Shoulder width apart if you're standing. Always make sure to have your back straight and feel that energy through the soles of your feet coming in from the earth and up your tailbone all the way. Open your heart. Breathe in and out. Find your center. And let's begin. You can opt to have your eyes closed or open. And let's begin. What is sacrifice but to completely let go of everything? Sometimes, I believe that we do self-sabotage, and then when we correct it and we work through it, that it will still be echoed in our reality as perhaps conditions that might appear as reflections. These are the echoes bouncing back to try and sabotage us in any way they can, whatever energies are working through others to do this. And it does happen, but most of these people, they're just vessels. They're not really aware. They're just picking up and playing the role because they most resonate to that. And so they act out in that way, not knowing why. But then it comes back. It's like a thing that we kind of attract to each other, and we play out all these roles. And once we're done self-sabotaging, why we might do this, I find that in the past I was doing that so that I can bring out whatever dark shadows. That was the only way of actually connecting with those, the brotherhood, if you will. You can call them Illuminatis, Freemasons, whatever they are, that they, in good intentions, they all had. But the only way I could connect to make a difference, I know, because they would show up in my reality and through their wives, and they would brag about their 33-degree husbands, and where I would place myself in the thick of things in that area so that I can make a difference And it had to be through that giving of a self-sacrifice in order to bring them out and make those changes for the rest of us. And sometimes this is what our mission is, because we're strong enough as warriors, light of this light, that we do these things and we do make a difference, even though it might never be noticed. But then we become aware of it. It's like, oh my goodness, I did this. And the changes do happen. And so, continuing on, what is sacrifice but to completely let go of everything? Surrender trust, and as was the practice of the previous chapter, to have the self completely lose itself into the abyss of the unknown. And this is how things reveal themselves. You know, we can do this, but we can also learn how to use that as a tool as well. Once we've mastered it and worked through it, and then we see the echoes. But sometimes we have to actually go and do this self-sabotage in order to bring that dense and break apart those kind of realities so that they show themselves and who they are. Otherwise, they would still be hidden and invisible. And these things would still happen, and we wouldn't know why they're happening. So we bring them out, and we make that difference. A lot of us are like this. We have done so much for this world to make these changes. And so whenever you're ready, let's begin with today's activation. This thing that will awaken within us so that we might be guided to work through whatever it is that will be encouraged from this affirmation, to give us the courage to work through it, to bring it out. And so let's begin. I sacrifice myself to live completely anew within the presence of this moment is all there is. To heal does not only of the mind require, but also the heart. I sacrifice myself to live completely anew within the presence of this moment is all there is. To heal does not only of the mind require, but also of the heart. So what we're doing is we're going through the soul and the body and light, spirit. I sacrifice myself to live completely anew within the presence of this moment is all there is. To heal does not only of the mind require, but also of the heart. And just breathe that in for a moment. Sacrifice is not like every other word that has been twisted out of its origin of interpretation and in the context of the present terminology that the collective holds to identify it with. Yes, it's another tool, but it's a little bit more advanced to grasp, in a sense of using it like we would like we would forgiveness, for example. This is more of a transformational approach rather than a transmutational one. And so sacrifice, it is in the only truest power in the sense of letting go and to surrender over the self in such a way that shortcuts into the ascension quicker. Yes, it could. Yes, absolutely it could, because we're doing it through that level. And so, however, just as quick as it had shot up, the self will come back down again to learn more of its process. The reason why it is mentioned in this chapter instead of the previous one is because actually it is the result. More, so to say, sacrifice is at the apex of ascension. It is the fastest way of getting there. However, the staying there and moving to the next and then the next, it requires the process of its practice to maintain a steady readiness. And like I also mentioned, how you can get the external to reveal itself. How to get the matrix to really see it for what it is, and all its players to come out, even if they're very, very well hidden. This is the way to do it. This is the way to bring them out, no matter what degree they might be, 33 degree, or the other ones who actually are playing them. Because they're just the ones that the poster boys and girls, really, even though they're that hidden and they're more occult and this brotherhood, there's still others who are at the top of that pyramid that never show themselves, and you wouldn't even know it. But this is what it would take to bring them out. And the frequencies must be a match on a steady level, and the gaps must close that bridge the frequencies apart. So whether we do it by using it as a tool to bring out certain things, to make changes into the collective, to bring about a betterment, whether we do that or whether we do it internally, there's two ways of using this tool. And so I sacrifice myself to live completely anew within the presence of this moment is all there is. To heal does not only of the mind require, but also of the heart. There are many examples of the mind of the self that reflect among the many who alchemically become unbalanced to achieve such states and crash and burn and or self-sabotage because the fear is greater. The gap is the space where the chemically unstable reside, to off-balance the mind and in such a way as to have stretched it in neglectfulness. Manic and depressant is one such illness to experience. Perhaps other forms and of milder states, the mind will perverse into the sacrifice of it, not allowing to release from the dogma, and in such a way that before it reaches the critical need for long-term use of medications. So this is more on the mental body, it describes. That yes, to rather the resistance mechanism of that which will then result and in the kind of self-sabotage that gave the new interpretation for sacrifice. These are symptoms, and that when they go uncared for, to notice are the extremes of frequencies from one end of the spectrum to the other. And so as the sun is starting to set, I will kind of condense this and make it a little quicker. So previous authors who might have had this plenty of credentials and as proven doctors of philosophy would not have recommended to go and pick apart the term sacrifice, like in the course of I can't even, like in the Course of Miracles, for example, is one that I could think of, and all the other books that have been inspired and motivated outcomes. For instance, Marianne Williamson and her books, and other people who have come out and really didn't make that much of a difference in the book. That's why they got into a little bit of problems, and they had to bring their own tribe and support system that half of them are dead now, like Wayne Dyer and things, and Susan Hayes and things like that. And of course Oprah was backing them all up, because I think they had to do with the Book of Seth and whatever other relations they had. But yes, so it was so closely related to the Course of Miracles, and not really that much difference, that they did kind of get in trouble for stepping on people's toes, especially the ones who passed on. And so this is giving in reference to these other previous authors who might have had plenty of credentials and as proven doctors of philosophy, politicians, and other, connected to the Brotherhood and what other else, because Canada and the UK and the Commonwealth, they're steeped with these Brotherhood, Illuminati, what do you call them, Freemasons, as well as the connection to them, Houston, Texas, and other places, that they're just a lot of them. And here in Ontario especially. And, they kind of blend in with their women, and they create their own Eastern Star, the Rebeccas, and they have other ones for other races, like, they are kind of racist, so they've created the other for also black people, that they've created these things, and it's a lot of exclusions. There's a lot of segregations, and this is how they empower each other. But it's not really. This is the thing. It's up to us as warriors of light to make these sacrifices so that they can show themselves, and we can make that difference, and we can make those changes through our setting of examples, by being these sacrifices, because we're strong enough, we can take it. And so these are the symptoms, and that when they go uncared for, to notice are the extremes of frequencies from one end of the spectrum to the other. And so for the many that have served as philosophers and other books, that they've gained so much credentials that they try to stay away from this term sacrifice and neglect it altogether, because it's too advanced a tool to be using, because it was something that only Christ and other ascended masters might have been able to showcase and show how it's done. But it could be used in many ways of releasing and transformation, of letting go of all the physical conditions that happen, that hold us down, especially when it comes to the Maya matrix, especially when it comes to the physical world. And this is how we do it. And yes, we could do it through the transmutational mental body aspect of it as well. So, and that's done normally. One good way of doing it, easy, is forgiveness. So for the many that they have served, and with pharmaceuticals instead, the neglect to use it as a tool of study was dismissed in it altogether as being an illusion. So sacrifice. How can we reach those levels where we can, or we have been doing as warriors of light, as the inner warrior, that we've been using sacrifice and self-sabotage as our tools? And we do it in a way where we know we will be able to come out of it and make a difference. And so dissension, ascension, dissension, ascension. But also we can note this thing called resurrecting. And so this is when we transfigure altogether into a different neighborhood. And so I sacrifice myself to live completely anew within the presence of this moment is all there is. To heal does not only of the mind require, but also of the heart. Ascension and its many disguises throughout the ages, and no longer lasting symptoms of self's historical stages. The purpose is to give another view from the hidden truths and that stored away the symptoms of ascension. As alchemists, as the magicians that we are, this is one of the ascension tools that we can master. Perhaps to consider in its progress of the mind to ascend beyond the dimensional levels of existence that could make for obsolete the need to convince of psychology and psychiatry altogether. Sacrifice, and only to scratch the surface of something that could be too deep to describe in one page. It has no bottom and comes right back out into the unknowable, and that the unknown can only grasp to really know. Again, what is the unknowable but the deep unconscious mind, and from it the unknown that is the subconscious, and then the known that is the conscious, and then the all-knowing that is the higher state of consciousness. And as I leave you here today, there's many things that have been accomplished that I've been kind of taking in, that through sacrifice I have brought out so many players from this thing called brotherhood. And I have made so many changes in this world that I'm like, wow, did I do all of that? And yes, the changes, there's so many of them, including now, well, within the funeral profession anyway, they dismantled so much and had to come back together again. But, you know, there's been changes, even though there's been a lot of people who have been kicked out. For instance, now they have to give a reason why they're firing, or, you know, why they're firing or letting go of somebody. They have to give a reason for it. Before, they never did. But I was the cause of those. That's one example. And then the other one was me having to go homeless and being thrown right out of my place that I lived for like 13 years. Because where I was living was like, well, the guy next door, he's about 100 now, going on. His name was Winfred or something like that. Anyway, he's been going to the Philippines, and he was responsible for removing organs from people, from children and things, and taking them and making money and selling it to others. So he's been exposed. And then the guy below me, this is what happened. So I tried to join the board. So many years I was on committees, bylaw committees, and learning all about the legal system. And as soon as I tried to get some fresh new blood in there, like me, this is in the gay community we're talking about, right in the Fruit Loops where the gay ghetto was. And as soon as I get threats, don't you dare go on the board, I started getting votes. People like 30 votes, and, you know, started going third time around. And people actually started liking and wanting me in to be part of the board. And so many years, operational services committee, I was the chair, I was the, so in order to become a liaison, and you have to be on committees, you have to be a board member. So I would be getting threats by, I guess, Delarmy or whatever, these guys who are part of this brotherhood. And yes, they're gay, whatever, it doesn't matter, but their bitterness and scornfulness. And they had this thing where the guy downstairs from me, he was into young children. He was into, He's like a pedophile. He's still around, but he got caught, and he didn't like it. So, and he would like have the children's panties all around and his like showcase them, on the balcony during the gay pride. But he was into young boys, and these guys are predators. And I brought them all out. They didn't like me. And so, and the guy who was upstairs from me, he was working in the courts, College Park. I think he was the stenographer or something like that. And he eventually, if you don't like it, leave, right? This guy, they were all alcoholics, and they still are. And so they would, you'd find them at the bar, and they'd be picking up lost children who would come to the ghetto or homeless or panhandling, and they would start hiring them to be their like little servants. And so the guy upstairs passed away, but he wanted to make sure that this was the last request he had to get me out, and it was the brotherhood request. These Freemasons, right? And so the guy who moved upstairs, who works for the city, TTC, whatever, he goes away on holidays. He has a house up north, and he goes to Cuba, and again, he enslaves these guys who have no money, and he gets his way with them. And they're all like weird people, but they have their perversions and whatever it is. But I actually brought them out to the point where they started becoming relevant to things. And so they had to get me out. So I found myself homeless for a while because they used the legal system in the way that they manipulated to arrest me for certain things like noise levels or altercations or whatever, mischief. I don't know, it was like I threw my bubble gum on the floor, and he said it was on his car, and they just found ways. They would get the security to break and enter into my car and ask for my keys, and they would come and watch me shower, and they would put cameras in my apartment. It got really weird. And so they got the law enforcement, they became very forceful and enforcing, and I ended up homeless for a while. And it wasn't until this was in 2015. So these guys are everywhere, and they're a brotherhood. And watch out, once they have a request, they will get their way. For instance, Highland, I better not say anymore, because it's like they threaten you, like you'll never have another job in funeral services if you leave here, and you gotta go on your knees and say sorry to Michael or whatever. And it's like, no, I know my rights. Then I try to get them to human rights, and I put a complaint in forward, and I'm saying these are the guys, and I show them up, and they're part of the Brotherhood Freemasons. And it's like, sorry, man, we can't do anything. They're like, and so I went through the whole system, and I just self-sacrificed and brought them right out. And so I found myself doing all these, and until this day, they still try to physically self-sabotage me. And it's the echoes now that I'm getting, because I no longer have to go to those depths to bring them out anymore. And so I've done my part. I've made a lot of changes. And so I think I've given some examples, and now, it just keeps coming up, like, to clear. And whatever remnants are left, now they're coming at me again with a special assessment, because now I'm an owner, right? So they're trying to get me with, again, I have to legally fight and go. And, the system is good. There's still good people in there. It's just that they noticed this guy who was upstairs from me, like, because my profession, it's not considered part of the city to be working. So I had to go through a lot of losses, make a lot of sacrifices, including the experience of homelessness, to get to the other side. And it's still happening. They still have a strong chokehold on our society, these brotherhood, masonry folk, even though a few of them have already died and things, they still are like so committed to each other. It's their duty to get things done. And, you know, and it would be nice if they did it in of the light way instead of the way that they're going through the dark, magical ways of doing things. And so I will leave you with this and what other experiences you might have when you can use sacrifice, or you can go through a mediator and just use Jesus Christ or some other figure that you can. But ultimately, it's about taking responsibility. All of us taking responsibility and not putting it on someone else to be the scapegoat. And so this is what this lesson is teaching us. If we go deeper, and one day we will be able to grasp it differently, and then another day again. And so I want to hear you say this and see what you get, what feeling, what frequency, what meaning, what exactly is it bringing out in you, in your environment, in your conditions, in your state of being. I sacrifice myself to live completely anew within the presence of this moment is all there is. To heal does not only of the mind require, but also of the heart. I sacrifice myself to live completely anew within the presence of this moment is all there is. To heal does not only of the mind require, but also of the heart. And just breathe that in. And one more time, and as many times as you'd like. You can pause this, you can rewind it, and keep saying these words until they have an effect, until you're able to absorb them and they open you up into your reality and make the difference. Let me hear you say it. I sacrifice myself to live completely anew within the presence of this moment is all there is. To heal does not only of the mind require, but also of the heart. And take another breath in. So how does it feel when you announce and renounce? I sacrifice myself. How does that feel? Where are the blockages when you say that? What is it that you have to physically shed from your reality through this sacrifice in order to transform your reality and yourself? And to see and feel a better version of yourself and that in others through the changes that are made, through the transitions, through the transitionings. So say it again. I sacrifice myself to live completely anew within the presence of this moment is all there is. So what blockages are you breaking and shattering when you say these words, and releasing that energy, your energetic body, to be able to be animated through this thing, this resilience that you made to heal. And it does not only of the mind require in a transmutational kind of way, but also of the heart. So we can do it in this way, but we're doing it through the soul, or are we doing it through the spirit? Which way are we doing it? So either way, it will affect our physical world to transfigure to a higher frequency, to a new neighborhood, to a quantum leap into another parallel reality, that the changes are now made and people are behaving differently. And if they don't and they can't, then they transition and recycle, and their souls move on to another physical reality and embodiment, which I've seen a lot of these brothers go. It's like over their dead bodies, and it's true. Some of them aren't willing to let go of these grievances, of these empowerments that they have over others in such ways of disconnect, because that is a dark magical act. And so sometimes, yes, it's exactly how Christ you could envision making those sacrifices, but they use religion in this way, and they use it to show this is the inverse way of showing that we're not actually learning from this as a role model that the ascended masters were teaching to empower ourselves, but we're using it as scapegoating and self-sacrificing others on the altar so that we may empower and feed off their energy. So that's called predatorial. And I don't want to put this is wrong and this is right and this is evil and this is good. So this is another way of seeing it for what it really is. And with that said, soul, thank you so very much. And I hope to see you again for the next episode and further exploration on what is ascension on day 237. And thank you for joining me here today.